Ready-to-mix powder to ready-to-drink liquid could very well become the dominant build model process amongst functional beverage entrepreneurs, though a recent hydration category example could be elemental in proving my strategic thesis correct. Did you pick up on the Easter egg I hid within that introductory statement? If not, sit patiently for a few seconds while I provide some additional context around what I've dubbed the beverage identity crisis. While I might be a bit biased considering my professional background, I believe the sports nutrition space has always been the often imitated, never duplicated, influential epicenter of all ingestible CPG categories. But many years ago, when I said things like the best and brightest sports nutrition brands could compete against any large CPG incumbent when it comes to functional food and beverage, it got its fair share of laughs. But then the massive mainstream success of Bang Energy happened in the late 2010s, and suddenly my early conviction around a non consensus view began to not look so crazy. Moreover, it also consciously or subconsciously inspired many sports nutrition brand entrepreneurs to take the leap from pre workout powders to energy drinks because those tens or even hundreds of millions in relatively high margin energy drink adjacent categorical retail sales were now seen as more than numbers on a spreadsheet or bank account, but members of an audience. And it's those powerful audiences that have become extremely valuable business assets and defensible competitive moats for CPG brands. Admittedly, sports nutrition brands like C4 Energy, Ghost, and Alani Nu didn't invent the build an audience first strategy, but they've leveraged it perfectly by also operating within the shadows of harder to track sales channels, where they can quietly incubate powdered pre workout energy supplement product lines that can then be extended into ready to drink beverage format. And the proof is in today's retail sales data for just how disruptively successful this build process has become within the energy drinks market. And though it's several years behind the energy categories changing in the guard, the same ready to mix powder to RTD liquid strategic format expansion playbook is starting to pick up momentum within the hydration category. A great recent example would be Ghost Hydration. But while I believe that has legitimate long term runway left, its powdered hydration supplement product line actually wasn't a material part of its total revenue yet before the decision was made to jump into RTD liquids this past February. So, like I stated in this clip from early April with the data insights company Spins, the hydration category version of my beverage identity crisis thesis needed that one mega brand example to really catapult this forward. I think that there's, probably a dozen or so, sports nutrition or like, active nutrition brands that have a decent, kind of stronghold within the powdered hydration set that could easily jump into a beverage whenever they decide. Even like, I think about these like mega players that it would make sense, maybe not because from a strategic standpoint, maybe they aren't set up for this or not, but like even like a liquid IV, like obviously they crush it in powders. I think originally maybe they were, if I remember correctly, maybe they did have a beverage like when they first started before anybody knew who they were and they realized it wasn't what didn't work for them. But like even like an Element like that is crushing it right now as well. Like I could see them becoming, big players in hydration if they really had everything else dialed in and everything going on there. Like I could see a path for a lot of these to become the next, 100 million, $250 million retail sale brands in hydration and make a, a significant dent in the space. Well, what I didn't know at the time was that a month later, Element would announce on its social media that after 2 years of development, the brand would launch an RTD liquid sparkling electrolyte water version of its extremely popular powdered stick pack hydration supplement. And before I disclose just how popular Element has gotten revenue wise and maybe why new product development took so long, let's first run through some quick background on the functional CPG brand. When Rob Wolf, James Murphy, and the other co founders looked around at the hydration category, they saw either electrolyte drinks often contained unnecessary sugars, additives, and artificial ingredients, or without a high enough sodium content that solved their nutrient gap problem. So in late 2018, LMNT was created to address that gap in the marketplace, an electrolyte replenishment solution that could keep the founding team hydrated during rigorous physical activities like CrossFit and match their low carb, whole food diet like paleo. And quickly, the founders realized LMNT by sticking to a simple yet effective formula, it solved similar issues for a much larger audience, thus driving the brand's growth. And LMNT doesn't hide its ingredient simplicity. In fact, it transparently provides the exact raw, unflavored base for customers to make it at home. That might sound crazy, but LMNT realized the cardinal rule of the functional CPG space. Great products are only the entry fee to compete in the market, as today's fast follower, low barriers to entry business landscape creates an environment where your best product features are too easy to copy and an insufficient long-term defensible competitive moat. Instead, winners and losers in the functional CPG space are largely determined by what you build off of those great products. LMNT has cultivated an extremely passionate community through diverse multi-channel engagement strategies and has become best in class at creating audience movement. LMNT has also gained substantial traction through endorsements by athletes, influencers, and health experts, most notably with Andrew Huberman, but also with NBA star Bradley Beal and one of the greatest athletes of all time, Lance Armstrong. But more than that, LMNT co-founder and respected health expert in his own right, Rob Wolf, has been out in front of the brand evangelizing its bold strategic narrative. This can't be overstated enough because that enables brands like LMNT to create a unique story that guides their entire internal and external business activity. But I've left you on a cliffhanger for long enough. Let's finally talk LMNT revenue numbers. According to audited financial documents submitted to the SEC on April 18th of 2024, LMNT generated just over $206 million in net sales for the 2023 calendar year. So LMNT grew an astounding 162% year over year off an already meaningful revenue base. In terms of profitability, LMNT had gross margins of 56.7% in 2023, a decline of 330 basis points year over year. Now, I don't follow the brand's movements extremely closely, but my assumption around the year over year margin decline is associated with LMNT being more aggressive around acquisition offers and retention efforts with increased competitive landscape pressures. Because LMNT hasn't yet expanded into margin dilutive large wholesale channels, and these financials were completed before the launch of the RTD sparkling electrolyte water, which is likely the ideal transition into talking more about the recent beverage identity crisis format expansion decision that supposedly had a 2-year development cycle. So let's talk about why it took so long. And remember, while I've been involved with hundreds of beverage product launches, I'm a business strategist and not a food technologist, which basically means, excuse my overly simplistic explanation. LMNT was not willing to compromise or sacrifice its powdered supplement product formula when it expanded into the RTD liquids format. LMNT also wanted the product to be carbonated and packaged within an aluminum can, compared to the typical plastic bottle used in the sports drinks market. So if you mix those two non-negotiables, you get a challenge, and that's because carbonated drinks are typically acidic, but carbonated drinks with high salt content was too corrosive to the typical plastic liner within aluminum cans. To solve this challenge, LMNT worked with, I believe, the Austin, Texas-based company named American Canning that has a high-performance aluminum packaging technology that focuses on hard-to-hold, corrosive-prone products. But solving the production complexities is only the proverbial starting line within the packaged beverage commercialization gauntlet. And I give them major kudos for the initial launch strategy where LMNT not only restricted it to loyal insider customers first, but the brand surprised tons of existing customers with first edition promotional cans, kickstarting a huge amount of passionate user-generated content. It was 2 weeks later, on May 21st, that LMNT opened availability to the public on its direct-to-consumer website. When you click into those LMNT sparkling listings, you already see an almost perfect score at over 1,000 customer reviews. But even with all that social proof and LMNT sparkling being priced per unit at a very respectable level to other rapid hydration drinks, the purchase hurdle is still $72 for a mix and match 32 count. Then you must consider the effect on margin profiles when you ship a parcel that weighs over 30 pounds. So before we even factor in the cost of goods, we are already almost at a dilutive margin in terms of its current core powders business. That means despite the perfectly controlled launch execution and online commercialization strategy, Element still needs to address its next big challenge within the packaged beverage commercialization gauntlet. And it's likely pretty obvious based on something I said earlier. Element hasn't yet expanded into large wholesale channels. The sports drinks market isn't won or lost over transactions on Shopify and or Amazon. By saying that, I'm not advocating that Element should go too wide too fast with that sales channel expansion. In fact, Element is sitting pretty right now, generating close to $42 million in net income last year. That means that they can fund the digital first strategy and fail forward as they learn the offline retail sales and beverage distribution game. Similarly, Element has been frugal and scrappy in how it raised outside capital, which limits pressure to be aggressive for liquidity event timeline purposes. But saying all that, I think Element should consider a strategic investment from an industry leader that has the expertise and resources that can enable the brand to scale more effectively in this next format and channel diverse phase. I've stated this several years ago, but Nutrabolt, the owner of C4 Energy, wants to build the health and wellness version of Unilever. While some portfolio expansion might come from internal brand development, I believe most will happen because of accretive deal making and full-on acquisitions that extends Nutrabolt into more key consumer-driven wellness platforms. And the $863 million investment from Keurig Dr. Pepper in December of 2022 gave Nutrabolt the flexibility to do that, resulting in the company making a significant minority investment into Bloom Nutrition this past January. But while Bloom was Nutrabolt's first minority investment, it won't likely be its last. And maybe Element would be a great second act to get more exposure to the hydration category. And for you, what about Scivation, sports nutrition industry folk? Sorry to say this frankly, but I don't see that ever being a mainstream packaged beverage brand. Alternatively, I can see a scenario where products focused on essential, non essential, or branched chain amino acids become this attractive bridge category between hydration and protein as GLP-1 weight loss solutions penetrate the marketplace further and those users learn more about the nutrient gaps that will need to be filled to better combat against muscle loss. But I just want to end with some quick final thoughts. While Element will provide the largest hydration category test to my ready to mix powder to ready to drink liquid dominant build model of the future within functional CPG, I'm not sure how quickly meaningful marketplace feedback in the form of scan data will show its face, as I haven't seen any large brick and mortar retail launch announcements or plans. Regardless, I'm expecting more categorical beverage identity crisis examples soon, with Jocko Fuel Hydrate launching, Rise testing a ready to drink hydration product, and another stealthy hyper-growth hydration supplement brand recently giving me the heads up of in-process RTD development as well. So as always, wild times are ahead within the functional beverage space. But I hope you enjoyed this YouTube video. If you did, consider hitting that like button to support me. Also help me get to my new short-term goal of 4,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. I'd love to see you join me on this journey, but we need to fix the fact that I think slightly over 90% of you at this point are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that makes me extremely sad. But I do want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.